May I ask everyone to take his or her seat? Good morning. The meeting of the Transit and Bus Committee is called to order. Mr. Marino, are there any public speakers?
Mr. Chairman, we have 3 public speakers this morning. The first speaker is Murray Bowden.
Thank you. Good morning. My name is Murray Bowden. I live in Hartsdale, New York, and my birthday is June 11, 1933. I tell you that because when they do an electronic search to find out these meetings that I speak on, it's tagged and it'll be easier to find me. The biggest problem I have this morning is with the press. I'm concerned with the L-line in Brooklyn where you're repairing it correctly and people are complaining, we are losing service, we have no service on a weekend. People of the press, you cannot repair a station and a line without shutting it down. You're not getting the good press you should get for upgrading the stations. And I take this opportunity to thank this organization for cleaning the stations, for doing it in an expeditious way. Where do some of these problems come from? Last Friday I had a meeting with Department of Transportation, Deputy Commissioner, and a Chief Engineer, and it was an excellent meeting. They heard me, I heard them. Within the financial constraints that there are around, things are moving forward very nicely. What came up was this book, Robert Moses, The Power Broker. Many of the problems that we're facing here today come from what he set up 1925, 1930, 1940. Bridge and Tunnels comes from Robert Moses. Yes, I know. I just have a little bit more to say. This is very important. He set up a culture where he thought the car was first, and it's not. The culture is transportation. He built the West Side Highway along the river instead of over the railroad tracks. He made it difficult for people to use mass transit. We're now unwinding the mistakes that he thought were correct then. Right out the window there, he wanted to build a bridge from the Battery to Brooklyn. Fortunately, President Roosevelt stopped him, and you have the Brooklyn Battery Tunnel. Unwinding that culture of thinking that he started. Everybody thought he was a great guy. With car-oriented transportation instead of mass transportation. So I think that all of the people who are involved with planning have to read about Robert Moses and the mistakes he made and how much to unwind what he did.
Thank you, Mr. Bowden. The next speaker is Beverly Fettman.
Good morning. My name is Beverly Fettman, and I come from Riverdale. And first, I want to thank this organization for having Access-a-Ride altogether. With all its failings, it has really helped people move when they could not otherwise. But there are flaws in this program, and I'd like to point out, if I only have time for one, I have several, but one that I would prefer that you really reconsider, and that is when people come from the Bronx and go to a doctor in Manhattan and cannot make a return reservation because they do not know how long that appointment will be, how long that will take. And so they need a taxi authorization. The taxi will only go to the border of Manhattan. And so is the person expected to get out of the taxi and then do what to get to home in the Bronx? Should they get a private taxi? Should they then call Accessoride to come and pick them up, arrange for it there? How that doesn't work, to have the taxi only go to the extent of the border of Manhattan. That's one a very important consideration. I'll just mention one or two other things. Outside, coming from the doctor's office, there is no place to sit. There's always a delay. Today, trying to come down here, there was a delay. And, okay, I have no more time, but I have one thing that can save you money. And that I know that you're always looking for that. When the library is 6 blocks from my house, people cannot go from our house to the library, and they call Accessoride. Sending an Accessoride car is $50, $60 to send out a car. Taking a taxi costs $8. So if I think that within a restricted area, within a 2-mile area, people should not have to take Accessoride, but should be able to take a taxi, get a taxi authorization. I think that would be a big savings.
Please summarize your remarks, Ms. Fettman.
Okay. I think that they should be, that ID cards should be issued, and that the contractors should all speak English. I live on Arlington. They kept saying Arlington. It's all the way at the other end of the Bronx. They have to be careful to understand. People have to know English. And I think that, I don't know how many people on the board use Accessoride or their family members, then you know the frustrations involved in waiting. Finally today, they came, we called, they said they'll call back, they never called back, we called again, and finally she said, there are no taxis in your neighborhood, take a taxi. So these ways of, these faults, shall I say, these weaknesses in the program should really be addressed. But the most important one is having taxis go to the outer boroughs. Thank you very much for listening. I appreciate your attention and the fact that there is Accessoride.
Thank you for your remarks. Theodore Fettman.
My wife is a very hard act to follow, and she's covered basically the points I had hoped to make. I would just like to emphasize the importance of being able to get a return trip through a taxi authorization if there's no way to predict the time that you will be returning home from a medical appointment or any other. That's one point. The other point is I would like to also emphasize a point my wife made that has to do with a question of interest, particularly to the MTA, looking to save on an issue such as fraudulent use of the accessorized system. One thing I would suggest is that when a carrier picks up a client, they should require display of the identification card of the passenger, because from what I have heard, people sometimes will allow to use their card. Finished.
Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much. That was the last speaker.
Okay. Now, committee will be asked to approve the minutes from the March committee meeting. Is there a motion and a second? Are there any changes or comment on the minutes? If there are none, all in favor? Minutes are approved. Are there any changes to the work plan?
Not this month, Mr. Chairman.
That's good. Then I'm happy to turn this portion of the meeting over to President Carmen Bianco.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good morning, everyone. I'd like to start today's committee meeting by acknowledging the gentleman to my right, Bob Bergen. Bob will be retiring at the end of this month, and I want to be the first to thank him for many, many years of service to the MTA. Bob has, I believe, around 17 years with the MTA, and he has served in a number of different positions, from General Counsel of Metro North, General Counsel of the MTA, and for the last 5+ years as the Executive Vice President at New York City Transit. And he's certainly has a passion for what we do here in the city and in the region. And Bob, I just want to thank you and wish you good luck in that next chapter of life. And I'd like to ask you all to acknowledge Bob.
Thank you. Thanks, Carmen. Thanks, everyone.
I thought we were going to get a longer speech, but okay. No. With that, let me acknowledge the press release that was issued earlier this month talking about subway ridership, and that it's grown 2.6% over the past year to 1.75 billion customers in 2014, which was the greatest, the highest we've seen in 65 years. And when you look at that growth is consistent with the growth that we see in the population of New York City. And you know, as we look at the growth that we see, it certainly has created its challenges for us in terms of delays, something that we talk about often here at committee, and certainly overcrowding. But I also think that, you know, as I sat back and I reflect on this, what comes to me is that we are seeing ridership as a result of the years and the investments that we've made back in this city. That the capital program certainly has worked. It's a program that over so many years the investments have brought people back. People feel safe. People feel that this is the primary way that they can get around the city. And certainly as we look forward, you know, the proposed capital program is critical so that we can continue to remain, you know, the system to remain vibrant and to handle the future needs of the city. As I turn this over to Joe, I just want to acknowledge that Joe will be reporting. While it's a beautiful day out there and it's sunny and it's almost 60 degrees, Joe's going to be reporting on February's data, which was not quite the same. So you will see some of the real challenges that we had in the delivery of service back in February. And I also want you to know on the issue of delays and overcrowding that I just spoke about, I believe it was like a month ago, I told you that we would be reporting out to you and that we would give you a presentation. And that presentation is on for the May committee meeting. So we will get into depth on the issue of delays and overcrowding and some of the ways that we will be mitigating that and thinking about it as time goes forward. So I want to turn it over to Joe so that he can start with your concurrence, so he could start the operating report.
All right, thank you. Good morning. As we briefly discussed last month, severe cold and winter weather in February presented significant challenges for the subway system. February was the coldest month on average since 1977. The low temperatures were lower than the normal low temperatures on all but 2 days for the month of February. There were 19 weekdays in February, and we operated a winter plan on every one of them. We ran de-icers on 10 of the 19 weekdays, and we stored our fleet underground on 10 nights during the month. I would like to point out a critical part of our winter operations plan is our snow fighting equipment. Our winter plan calls for strategic deployment of miscellaneous equipment such as diesel locomotives, snow throwers, jet blowers, and de-icers throughout the duration of these storms. In addition, we equip revenue equipment on each line with ice scraper contact shoes that assist in alleviating ice conditions on the third rail. I would like to commend the engineering and the maintenance teams who have supported this fleet's strong performance, and you, the board, who has continued to support our investment in critical behind-the-scenes rolling stock, and the rest of the New York City Transit family whose individual contributions ensured we delivered safe service to our customers throughout the winter season. Despite the challenges we faced in February, our efforts to promote evenness of service resulted in another steady month of weight assessment performance. As mentioned by Carmen earlier, we will be discussing our performance in more detail in a special presentation on system challenges and our action plans to alleviate some of those delays, and we will address them next month. Before closing, I would like to highlight the strong efforts the subway team did during the water main break that occurred during the evening of April 8th. Which brought about 2 feet of water into the 14th Street stations on the 1, 2, and 3 line that flooded all 4 tracks. Our crews worked through the night to remove an estimated 225,000 gallons of water, cleared debris, inspect equipment, replace signal components, and clean third rail insulators, and resume service all in time for Thursday morning's rush. Lastly, you have seen stories in the news recently about kids entering the tracks to engage in illegal, dangerous, and criminal activity. I want to remind all riders, the tracks are very dangerous. It is a dangerous environment. Even the most experienced employees require special protection on the trackway. I want to be clear to everyone who is listening here today. If you know someone who would be interested in considering this type of activity, do not do it. We have seen too far many individuals seriously injured as a result of these types of incidents. And lastly, if you ever witness an unsafe act on the tracks or someone who drops something on the tracks, please report it to an MTA employee or a police officer or use the help point system on the platform. And that concludes my report.
Mr. Merdler.
Carmen, am I correct that one of the reasons that we have seen, again, this increase in weekday weight assessment is the need to replace and refine the signal systems? Is that a factor in the delays and the inability to move the trains as fast as you and Joe would like to see them move?
I think you hear us talk about the signal system from the perspective that in the capital program, we're moving forward with a more, a state-of-the-art program in communication-based signaling. And we know that once we bring that online, that communication-based signaling will allow us to increase the capacity on the line, therefore more trains, the ability to move more folks, the ability to tighten up the headways between trains. So yes, we get that benefit out of it. Today, when you're dealing with the system that we have, where you're running 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. There are a number of factors that come about as a result. One of them certainly is we have to find ways to balance our approach on maintenance and inspections, right? So because we're out there running, we may have to be out there inspecting and when we're actually in revenue service, and so we may have to delay some trains for that reason, and that's important. You know, there are other systems around the world that have, you know, that shut down at certain parts of the night for 5 hours or so, and they have the ability to do some of the critical maintenance during those periods. We don't have that luxury, and I'm not complaining. It's just the hand that we're dealt, and we have to find ways to do it. Also, you know, when you're dealing with a system like our signal system, you raise that one as a particular issue. You know, as it ages, while it is absolutely fail-safe, and that's the way it's designed, you know, I always use the analogy, it's a little bit like me. You know, when I was in my 20s, I never went to a doctor, but now that I'm in my 60s, I see my doctor's become my best friend. And so it takes a little bit more tender, loving care. You know, even though I'm healthy and I feel great, you know, I visit the doctor a little bit more than I did when I was a much younger man. So, and I think that's part of what you deal with a system that's beginning to age. But I'm not sure where you were directing your question, but I think the answer to this is...
Let me, if I may, comment. My purpose in asking was to drive home two facts. Fact number one is that absent approval of the capital plan, you will be unable to do the kind of maintenance, repair, including signals and the like. Am I correct in that?
We're not talking, maintenance generally comes under the operating, it's part of the operating plan, but your point's well taken, yes?
And the second reason for asking it, making the point, is I want to drive home to residents of the city of New York that to the extent they have a grievance in terms of subway and bus service, one way of addressing that grievance is to make it clear to the governing authorities of the city of New York and to their elected representatives, it's up to them to support the capital plan. And I thank you.
Thank you. Now I'd like to, I'm sorry, Mr. Greenberg.
Yes, I feel obligated to say this. I have a couple of questions about, since we're talking about reliability and maybe even recovery, wouldn't CBTC, installation of CBTC on a line, give you a much better ability to recover from a delay? That's right, right. Correct. So then, I mean, to Commissioner Myrtle's point, and I want to make that clear, is that people would experience less severe delays if we had CBTC. You could run the trains closer together, therefore you'd be able to recover from a delay. Therefore, it would be very good if we could install CBTC as soon as possible, not just finish the 7 line, not just on the L, but especially on the Queens Boulevard line, which I believe is next. So, and that's in the next capital program. So that's the point why people should support the MTA's capital program. If you don't like the crowding, if you're coming from Queens on the E and F, relief is going to be there, only if we get money for the capital plan.
Yeah, you know, and I agree with both of your comments, and I certainly would be supportive of both of your comments. Yeah, it's really critical that we not only continue to support the proposed capital program. It's critical for so many reasons, but you know, even beyond that, as we think about the number of customers we have today and the fact that ridership continues to grow, it's not just about maintaining the system that we have, but we absolutely have to be thinking about what do we need to do to meet this growth in the years to come. So the story's even larger than we're telling it today.
Thank you. Now I'll call on President Irick to cover the bus operations section of this report.
Good morning. MDBF in the month of February was 4,206 miles, a 10% increase from the last February. This is a significant accomplishment when we consider that this February was New York's third coldest February on record, and that more than a quarter of our fleet is past its 12-year useful life. In fact, 1,100 of our overage buses are 15 years old or more. As I reflect on this accomplishment, I would like to again thank my entire team of over 18,000 employees for their hard work and perseverance through this winter season and all through the year. These men and women do an amazing job of serving our 2.5 million daily customers. They operate, maintain, supervise, and manage our bus fleet of over 5,700 buses on 300 routes, providing 55,000 daily trips in the nation's harshest duty cycles. I'm happy to report that to date we have 194 new buses delivered. However, as I have mentioned before, we will not be able to rid our fleet of all of our current overage buses until the proposed 2015 through 19 capital program is approved. Finally, although we have made it through the winter season, we are not resting on our laurels, but have begun gearing up for the challenges of the summer months, and we will be making sure our equipment and personnel are prepared. And that completes the bus operations report.
Mr. Merdler.
Darrell, I'd like to just sharpen a couple of points. How many buses do you run a day?
Out of that 5,700, at peak time, some 4,700 buses are in service.
And approximately how many riders do you have on a given day?
Weekday ridership, is, as I mentioned, is around 2.5 million people a day.
Now, other than the select buses, do the express buses and the other regular buses use the same lanes as the automobiles?
The vast majority, yes.
And so they have to go through the same cavernous potholes that the rest of us have to do? They have to go through the same mosquitoes of the taxis that the rest of us have to do? And that impacts on their ability to get to places as fast as some people would like. Is that correct?
That is correct.
So let me ask you this. Do the buses carry as many people as ride on bicycles? Obviously more, right?
Obviously.
Do they have a private bus lane like the bicycle lane? And if they had one, wouldn't it move the buses faster?
It would certainly help.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Albert.
Joe, I didn't realize we were moving to buses so quickly. In the weekday terminal on-time performance chart, it appears that the 2 and the 5 have had a really bad time. Did something calamitous happen on White Plains Road or on Nostrand Avenue that it would that those 2 would be so much worse than the others?
No, well, I'm not going to say the statistics are what they are. It's one of the areas that we're looking on. When we report in May, the areas that we first picked were the Lexington Avenue line, to start looking at the Lexington Avenue line, as well as the F and the 7. I think with the 2, what you see is it's one of the longest lines, and so it's, as we heard from the previous committee meeting with the Long Island Railroad, it's got a few choke points. So I think some of the work that's being done on Dyer, we have work going on signal and modernization at Dyer that's hurting the on-time performance, as well as when you have Jackson Avenue, you actually end up coming back down at some of those merge points. So it's one of the things that Peter and my group is looking at, is what we could do on those lines, the 2 and the 5.
Mr. Capelli.
Okay, this, I guess, could come in at different points during the meeting, but I might as well bring it in now on the subject of ridership and fares. There's been a discussion, Darrell, that fare beating is a minor offense. Now, this board has spent a lot of time in the past several years combating fare beating, particularly in bus operations, which we had estimated to be somewhere in the neighborhood of a $60 to $100 million project, and we've devoted resources internally to trying to stem that flow.
Give me, Mr. Capelli, would you delay that a second? They had to get their camera angle.
What's that? Okay. Anyway, a $60 to $100 million problem, and when you combine in the the transit component of that, okay, we're probably talking about a problem in the neighborhood of $100 million plus per year out of our fare box, which is almost twice what the service cuts that we had to implement in 2008 were. How are we doing to combat that effort currently, and with respect to the bus service and the project that we have underway?
Yeah, what I would do is defer. I think sometime in the next several months we'll be giving some report on all of our efforts around fare. I think it was a year ago or so that the board gave us resources to deal with that, and I think we owe you a report, and I think that's forthcoming in the next several months. Peter, do we know when? Do we have a sense?
We're working with security. I think they're the lead on it, but
So your point's well taken. We are behind the scenes right now pulling that together with the hope to give you a presentation
With respect to the bus operations?
with respect to bus operations.
Okay. In general, though, in addition to what efforts we're taking to employ more personnel, while this public policy debate is taking place in the city of New York, are we communicating with elected officials to remind them of the correlation between the reduction of fares and how it impacts on services, which when cut disproportionately affect the poor in the city?
I think that comes out in different ways, yes, absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Just a quick footnote. Certain people in the city of New York have urged that we go lightly on those who jump the turnstiles in the subways and decriminalize that process. And my question is, A, do you have any data that shows how many people have been found to jump the turnstiles, and how much it would cost if we did a lessening of enforcement? And B, if we do that, why wouldn't it pay to just make it completely free and take the mayor's position to utopia? That was a rhetorical
Position, Mr. Merdler? Is that the mayor's position?
I apologize.
Yes.
I apologize.
And Mr. Merdler raises an issue that we could take a little further, which is what percentage of people that evade the fare have been found to have much more serious crimes and or a loaded weapon on their person?
And perhaps that would be a discussion that is best joined by Chief Fox during his section of the report. And let me simply ask the committee's indulgence to stay with bus operations to the extent that we can, and then move on to safety, to have some semblance of following our agenda this morning.
Okay, good morning. Safety results were as follows. With the exception of fires, all items discussed refer to rates. Subway customer accidents and injuries decreased when comparing January 2015 with January 2014 and on a 12-month basis. Subway fires decreased when comparing February 2015 with February 2014 and were flat on a 12-month basis. In February, 99.2% of the fires were low or average in severity. Bus collisions and collision injuries decreased when comparing February 2015 with February 2014 and on a 12-month basis. Bus customer accidents and injuries were up both on a monthly and 12-month basis. Employee lost time accidents decreased when comparing February 2015 with February 2014 and on a 12-month basis. Thank you.
Thank you. Now it's time for Chief Fox.
As I read my statement, is this on? Yes. How's that? As I read my statement, it'll appear that some of the people in this either read my statement or wrote it, helped me write it. Good morning. Well, for the first quarter of 2015, total major felony crime was down 16% within our transit system compared to the same period in 2014, and that's 477 crimes versus 569. These 92 fewer incidents include an 18% decline in robberies and a 16% decline in grand larcenies. For the month of March, major felony crime within the transit system was down 6.7%, a decline led by a 9.7% drop in robberies, 28 versus 31, and a 5% decrease in grand larcenies, 116 versus 123. Year to date, we've averaged 5.3 major felonies per day, down from the 6.3 per day that we averaged the same period in 2014. Additionally, this year we have averaged 1.1 robbery a day, down from the 1.3 that we averaged a day during the first 3 months of 2014. Of the 166 major felonies in March, 40% were committed in Manhattan, 10% in Queens, 34% in Brooklyn, and 24% in the Bronx. And as you're likely aware, we began this year with several arrests for illegal firearms within the transit system. This year we made 10 such arrests, 3 more than the same period last year. But riders should be reassured that our continued focus on enforcing minor violations will lead to arrests for more serious crimes, such as the possession of illegal guns, making the subway safer as a result. In fact, many of these arrests are made when our officers stop people who enter the system by unlawfully evading the fare, proving the importance of pursuing such violations. I believe 6 out of those 10 were for fare evasion. A keen eye towards criminals who use Metro card vending machines for fraudulent transactions can have similar results. On April 22nd, District 4 Officer Jose Calais Palempue and Lieutenant Angela Morris were focused on the Metro card vending machines at 86th Street and Lex. While watching a male make a transaction, they noticed that he was in possession of a young woman's driver's license. Investigating further, they discovered he was using the same woman's credit card to make the purchase. They quickly learned that the woman had unknowingly been the victim of a larceny earlier that morning. The perpetrator, whose history includes arrest for robbery, grand larceny, and rape, was immediately arrested. He's charged with grand larceny and criminal possession of stolen property in this case. Thank you for all of our teams involved in keeping passengers' MetroCard transactions safe. I thank Mr. Tom Prendergast, Freddie Farrar, Carmen, and Joe Leder, and the members of this board. And any questions or suggestions, please share.
Can I ask, Joe, do you have or can you get any data on the number of fare jumpers that jump over the turnstiles or try and go around them? Do you have any such data?
Yes, back to you with the exact number of arrests. It's actually in this briefing book here. It's something, and it's important to note that with fare, if somebody's properly identified, they have identification, they get a tab, a summons, which is civil in nature, as we know, and they usually walk away from that very spot within 20 minutes or a half hour. And that happens in the majority of the cases. So it's only when somebody doesn't have identification or has other aggravating factors, such as they're transit recidivist or armed with a weapon, like in these cases, that they go to the district to be processed. And even in those cases, a good number of those are given desk appearance tickets within a few hours. Ira, sorry.
So that you take steps to avoid criminalizing it within the existing system, is that correct?
Absolutely, because we want our officers to, of course, enforce the law, prevent crimes, but to be out there as much as possible. So we'd rather them be out in the system. Ira?
If someone has ID, someone writes a Transit Education Bureau summons, and they have to come back and whatever for that. How do you know whether they've had any prior, whether there's a warrant out on them?
Well, we run the name when we
on a handheld device,
yes.
Right? They run it anytime someone's caught. They run the name, and if they're clear, you let them.
Right.
You just give them the ticket as
no,
long as they have ID.
We run the name with the ID.
Right.
We run the name to see if they're wanted,
Okay.
and if they're not, which is the majority of our TOS, theft of service stops, they get a tab, a summons, and they walk away within 20 minutes.
It's like a parking ticket.
Exactly.
Mr.
Alan?
Capelli?
Once again, thank you for helping to make our system one of the safest systems in the world. It has been through the efforts of your department and the vigorous enforcement that you do on all of these aspects of it that have helped stem the tide of days gone past when the system was not safe to one where now people can ride comfortably without fear of their own safety.
Thank you, Alan, and thank you for your compliment. And as soon as I leave here, I'll send out an email to all COs verbatim with what you said and ask them to pass it on to their teams.
Okay, and I would just urge, as the police department continues to negotiate with city officials on these issues, that in addition to public safety, which is of course paramount in all of our concerns, the revenue aspect is very important to us as well, in that we are constantly operating on a very thin margin, and that losing funds out of our fare box imperils fares being what they are and services being what they are. So thank you.
Absolutely, Alan. Thank you.
Excuse me? Just one. You can
Mr.
add,
Greenberg.
if you want to add my name to the
To the email?
to the email, to any conversations with the city council.
I think the conversations with the council are being continued with Commissioner Bratton. But as far as thanking our bureau, I think I'll start out with you and Alan in the email and Ira, and then I'll include the whole board. To Chuck, as you've made that same compliment every single month, basically since I've been the chief of transit. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief Fox.
Thank you, sirs.
Now I'll ask President Bianco to address the finance report.
Thank you. Preliminary February 2015 New York City Transit fare box revenue was $307.1 million, $13.9 million or 4.3% below budget, due mostly to adverse weather that included nearly 12 inches of snow and frigid temperatures that made February 2015 the coldest February since 1934. Preliminary February 2015 operating expenses were below budget by $3.2 million, or 0.6%. Labor expenses were higher by $7.9 million, or 2%, due mostly to an increase overtime expense caused by the adverse weather. Non-labor expenses underran budget by $11.1 million, or 8%. Year-to-date operating expenses were less than budget by $4.3 million, or 0.4%. Preliminary ridership, February 2015 New York City Transit ridership totaled 179 million, 4.1% below budget. The February 2015 average weekday ridership results compared to February 2014 as follows. Subway ridership was 5.6 million, that's an increase of 2.3%. New York City Transit local bus ridership was 2 million, that's an increase of 0.3%. New York City Transit express bus ridership was 42,000, an increase of 1.9%, and paratransit ridership was 27,000, an increase of 5.7%. An early look at preliminary March financials. March 2015 fare box revenue was 10.4 million. That's 2.8% above budget, due mainly to an $11.9 million positive adjustment made to the January and February revenue base on updated first quarter average fares. Preliminary March 2015 operating expenses exceeded budget by $8 million, or 1.5%. These initial results are currently under review.
Thank you.
I hope this is the right place. I want to focus on the comments concerning paratransit for a moment. I've asked Mr. Charles if he could, at some point that you deem appropriate, address the issue, particularly of the requirement that the taxis cannot go beyond the border of Manhattan and come to the Bronx and presumably to Brooklyn, Queens, and if necessary, Staten Island. If that is a requirement, it seems to me to be somewhat ridiculous.
No, I think that we agree. You agree to do this, right?
It's not a requirement to stop at the border. What we're managing is the trip from origin to destination. Some fares between Riverdale and portions of Manhattan exceed almost $75. So I just spoke to the two customers. We'll look at their particular trips. But right now, we're wrestling with what we call long-distance interborough taxi trips that exceed a fare of 75 or more. We're trying to come up with a fare policy. It's about managing costs.
So the issue is an issue of cost, not of boundaries, is that
Correct,
it?
correct.
And you are working on something to try and deal with that issue?
Yes, something that would be fair to all
May I
parties.
respectfully request that you might have a conversation with the two speakers to see if
I
you
just
can
did.
focus
I
on...
just did.
You have?
Yes.
Good, thank you.
Are we ready for the bus finance section of this report? And back to President Irick.
February 2015 fare box revenue for MTA bus was $600,000 or 4% less than budget due to lower ridership caused by adverse weather. MTA bus non-reimbursable expenses were $50 million in February. That is $1.1 million or 2.3% above budget. For ridership, February 2015 MTA bus ridership totaled 9.1 million. That is 3.8 or 400,000 riders below budget, primarily due to the colder than normal temperatures. However, on a 12-month rolling average weekday bus ridership was 1.9% better than last year, and average weekend ridership was 2.1% better than last year. And this concludes the bus finance and ridership report.
Thank you, President Irick. Now I'd like to ask Fred Smith to address the capital program.
Good morning. Looking at capital program results, 9 commitments during February totaled $81.4 million, including installation of Help Point kiosks at the next 80 stations. Those kiosks will be installed at various stations on the Concourse D, Jerome No. 4 train line, lines in Brooklyn, and also on Lexington Avenue and 8th Avenue in Manhattan. Security fencing continued with 2 locations in Brooklyn, 38th Street Yard and Linden Boulevard Rail Yard. Also under the Sandy program, a resiliency project to make improvements to seal manholes and waterproof existing conduits and ducts will be performed at 6 fan plants in Manhattan, and that is part of the federal small business mentoring program. Meanwhile, 9 completions during the month of February totaled $28.8 million, including 2 segments of mainline track along the 4th Avenue and Eastern Parkway lines in Brooklyn, and station component work, repairing ventilators, gratings, and improving drainage at the Elmhurst Avenue station on the Queens Boulevard line and Grand Street station on the Canarsie line. And for your information, in construction, on the Pelham line, we had 2 stations that had been out of service. While we did renewal work and extensive structural repairs to the mezzanine, they were placed in service yesterday at Buer Avenue and Zuriga Avenue. Work is continuing at Pelham Bay. That completes my report.
Thank you. If there are no further questions on the totality operating report, I'll ask Steve Plachaki to present the procurements.
Good morning. The procurement package, which presents New York City Transit and MTA capital construction procurements, includes 6 actions totaling $651.4 million in expenditures. I would like to highlight 2 procurements included in this month's agenda. The first item is a 5-year estimated quantity contract for the purchase and delivery of 240 million gallons of ultra-low sulfur diesel No. 2 fuel with additives for the combined fleets of approximately 5,000 diesel-powered buses for both New York City Transit and MTA Bus. The procurement was conducted through the use of a competitive request for proposal process, resulting with an award recommendation to Sprague Operating Resources, LLC, in the estimated amount of $633,284,746. Bus fuel represents one of the most critical commodities procured by New York City Transit, whose quality and availability cannot be compromised. New York City Transit specification delineates the chemical characteristics of the fuel to include cold weather operability parameters and the incorporation of additives mandated by the engine manufacturers, which include lubricity, cetane, and detergency. As the failure to meet these exacting specifications could impact the operability of bus engines, as well as the depot on-site fuel tanks and filtration systems, the RFP required the proposers to address how they would comply with the demanding technical specifications. An extensive outreach to 34 petroleum refiners and distributors was conducted prior to the solicitation. As a result of this outreach, 12 companies requested the procurement package, 4 proposals were received, and after oral presentations and several rounds of negotiations, 2 companies were requested to provide their best and final offers. After evaluating the best and final offers in accordance with the evaluation criteria, the selection committee unanimously recommended Sprague for award as it received a superior technical evaluation and offered the lowest overall pricing. As a result of the competitive procurement process, as well as extensive negotiations with both finalists, Sprague's best and final pricing was approximately $25 million less than the other competitor, and $8.2 million lower than the pricing currently in place under New York City Transit and MTA Bus's existing fuel contract with Sprague. The second item I would like to highlight is a construction change order with Plaza Chavone JV for the Fulton Center Finishes Enclosure contract. As a result of the reprogramming of the Fulton Center, which increased the amount of retail space, different security protocols were required. This modification is for additional closed-circuit television cameras and intrusion access controls throughout the center, and will also include construction of a new security office and changes to communication, fire, alarm, and sprinkler systems. In order to mitigate the impact of the projects on the project schedule and expedite the installation of these security measures, the contractor was authorized to commence work. Through negotiations, we were able to reduce the contractor's original proposal by 20%. That resulted in the final cost of $7.5 million, which was found to be fair and reasonable. I ask for your approval of all actions in the agenda.
Motion and second.
Chairman, I ask to be recused on item number 1.
So noted. Mr. Ballin. Yes.
Okay. Hi. I just Sprague one. So it's a 5-year contract
Correct.
with, if you look at the price of oil and oil-related products over the last 5 years, you've seen it go all over the place.
Correct.
In order to protect, both us, of course, but the other side in a mutually fair arm's-length transaction, what protections are there that if the price spikes, that we are held to a safe economic place, and if the price declines a lot, that they don't have a windfall? Is that built into this somehow?
Well, let me try and address that on a number of different fronts. One of which is we use a weekly unit Argus price index. So despite who wins the contract, the pricing of fuel will sort of float with the market, and we have a reliable indicator that we use to track that. The competitive portion of this is the differential in the cost, and that's really the competitive portion that covers the actual purchase, the storage, the distribution, the treating of the fuel. That's this procurement. So this is a supply chain procurement. MTA also hedges this particular account, and the methods that we utilize to procure as well as hedge are consistent. So we protect our budget by hedging. Okay.
Steve, I have one question. On the Fulton Center enclosure, does that expenditure of $1.5 million enhance leasable space? That is, grow it? Does it enhance our revenue from it? What does it do?
The $7.5 million is to incorporate issues associated with revised security protocols. When we change that from office space to retail space, we effectively continue to look at the security protocols that are in place. And what this does is this adds cameras, communication areas, has a lot to do with conduit being hung, and also creates a security review room.
Was this unanticipated earlier?
I think maybe not unanticipated, but certainly reviewed as the program developed. in terms of looking at the security measures in place to make sure that we had a handle on it.
If I may, this was actually originally not in the program. The program has changed over time, and as the change would occur, that was, in effect, something that was thought necessary to enhance the security, and in order not to delay the opening, that was added at a later stage, and it will be in place, and that we are starting it, so we expect to be done by the end of the year. So as the leases come online, that will be there as well.
So that is the rationale for this additional expenditure?
That's correct. Okay. And it's, by the way, within the budget that we had. We had enough money to accommodate that as part of our budget.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor? Opposed? With one recusal on item number 1, the package carries. Now I'd like to ask Peter Caffiero for the service change portion of this agenda.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We have 4 staff summaries this month for service changes on New York City Transit. The first is a proposed reroute of the M35 bus on Randall's Island. In recent years, Randall's Island has become a major sports and recreation center with more than 60 athletic fields used by school groups and community organizations. The M35 is the easiest way to get on and off the island, but the current routing, which is its historical routing, does not directly serve many of the new athletic fields on the southern portion of the island. After working closely with the Parks Department and the Randall's Island Park Alliance, we are recommending operating the M35 via the eastern roadway of Hellgate Circle. The easiest way probably to understand this is to look at the map in the staff. This change would, at no additional cost, improve access to the athletic fields and other unserved areas of the island. The next proposal, staff summary, is to implement Select Bus Service, SBS, on the M86 crosstown bus route in Manhattan. The M86 currently serves 25,000 daily riders, making it the second busiest crosstown bus in Manhattan. It serves densely populated neighborhoods in the Upper East and Upper West Sides, connects riders to 6 subway and 12 north-south bus routes, and has the most passengers per mile of any bus route that we operate. The M86 will include features found in other SBS routes, such as off-board fare collection and specially branded articulated buses. Additionally, bus bulbs will be built by the city at Lexington Avenue and 3rd Avenue in 2015 and 2016. New York City Department of Transportation will install wayfinding signs and real-time bus arrival information at the majority of the SBS stations on the M86. There will be no change in routing to the M86 route. The implementation of this service on the New York City Transit side will cost approximately $1.6 million annually, which is included in the approved operating budget. The third staff summary includes our routine bus schedule adjustments to match rider demand and operating conditions. This month, for the June 2015 pick, we've reviewed 50 bus schedules, proposed schedule changes on 44 routes. Implementation of these changes are expected to save $1 million annually. These savings will be incorporated in the 2015 operating budget. Note that, in addition, we will be incorporating additional bus and Staten Island Railway trips to meet the new overnight ferry trips on the weekends that are being added this spring by New York City Department of Transportation. So those will be built into this pick in June, but we'll begin operating them when the ferry service begins in May. The last service change staff summary is for routine schedule adjustments on the subway side. As we do for buses, we also regularly review subway ridership. Although much of our subway service is capacity constrained, we do make adjustments where they are feasible. We are recommending changes on 5 routes for the full 2015 service changes, including notable service additions middays on the L and evenings on the number 7. These changes will cost $1.6 million annually and will be incorporated also into the budget. This concludes the service change section of the agenda.
Thank you. Mr. Albert.
I think all of us that use the M86 are thrilled that we're finally getting this SBS. Anyone who's ridden that bus sees the dwell time at Lexington Avenue with the unbelievable delays of utilizing one door and dipping the Metro card and waiting for it to be processed, and people reading their balance and all of that. So I think it's going to make a big difference on the M86. I'm really thrilled to see the increase in some of these overcrowded subway line services as well, but I'm wondering, how did the D train manage to elude the surge in ridership that all of the other lines seem to be? How can we cut one run out of the D? Isn't that just as crowded as the others?
Well, the short answer is no, it's not. The ridership has been growing on the D and the concourse, but this particular part of the rush hour, as you can see from the numbers, we are significantly below guidelines, and both to be equitable and to allow us to reallocate some of the rolling stock to other lines that have a higher need. We continue to adjust, as we do on the bus lines, as you see this month, and compared to the last time we brought bus changes, we had a significant add. So we're always trying to best match the ridership as we can.
No, I understand that, but my question is, let's say at that hour it was light on the concourse. The D, of course, goes down through Midtown, downtown, and into Brooklyn. What if it's not light on those sections? Those folks are going to lose a round trip.
Okay. Well, this particular adjustment is on the southbound in the late AM peak and northbound in the PM peak, later PM peak. So it's not impacting Brooklyn. And we do measure the ridership at what we call the peak load point. I think we'll talk a little about that more next month as well. The peak load point in this case on the D, the A and D, is between 125th Street and 59th Street. So that's where we are looking at the ridership levels. And northbound, obviously, also departing 59th Street in the evening.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
If there's, Mr. Capelli.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Let me just add my vote of thanks to staff for the increase in transit that we've got here. This is something that I think makes all of us very happy. And I mentioned not only the New York City Transit for its efforts, but also the joint efforts with the de Blasio administration and their able transportation commissioner, who have increased the SBS for Manhattan, which is a terrific thing to see, and a decades-old problem of increasing ferry service to Staten Island and the corresponding transit that needs to meet those increased services, which has been a long time needed by the residents out there. So good job on everybody's part. Thank you.
If there's nothing else on the service change part of this report, let me ask President Bianco to update on special reports and presentations.
Thank you. Section 8 of this month's agenda includes our regular status report on the MetroCard program. Also included in this section are the final year-end 2014 operating results for New York City Transit, Sertoa, and MTA Bus. Thank you.
Are there any questions or comments? If not, I'll ask Dr. Rodnicenu for capital construction projects report.
Okay, I'll start with the Second Avenue report. As of now, we are 82% complete on the Second Avenue, and I would like to kind of review where we stand on each and every one of the stations. We'll be fast if we move it on. Okay, Lexington Avenue, 63rd Street, we are 88% complete at this point. This is just a picture of the flooring, and these are the architectural finishes. The station is completely being redone. These are the new column claddings throughout. This is actually entry number 1 into the building. This used to be a store there. Some people may know it's at the southeast corner of 63rd and 3rd. It was Pookie and Sebastian, and we're done. It's going to look a little more like this. And that actually showed you what we're looking at. The inside, we have already started to put the ventilation equipment. You can see it's quite massive, and this is in place. At 72nd Street, We are 56% complete, and actually the area that we are most worried about it is entry at number 1 at 301 East 69th Street. There will be from the sidewalk, we already excavated down to the bottom, and you can see that's the wall that we're going to break into the under the building in order to connect to the station. And we are digging this particular tunnel from both directions in order to make up time. At the entrance number 2, this is going to be both an ancillary building, quite large, and an entry point. And this is actually a picture of the construction, and we came above ground already, and we're moving up. This is actually looking down into that ancillary facility. We are looking here at the equipment room, the power equipment room at 72nd Street. We started to equip that. And in the station, we started to install the escalators, so that's actually moving along well. This is another picture at the platform level, and you can already see that we have the hangers on the wall to start putting the finishes on. 86th Street is actually the one that is the least advanced. We experienced at the very beginning some delays in awarding the contract due to an issue, Buy America issue that was solved. These are some of the pictures at the mezzanine level, it's actually that's advancing, but not as fast at this point as we would like to see it. And we had discussion with the contractors in order to accelerate the work. And again, this is a picture. I was there just this Saturday again to look at it, and it's moving. But they instituted a second shift right now, and the expectation is that they will continue that until they are able to bring it to fruition. 96th Street Station is about 67% done. Again, this is, and the picture here is telling because these are the utilities on the east side of the roadway that we have replaced, put back in place, and you can see the magnitude and the number of utilities down there. This is actually, we finished that piece. We just put temporary pavement back in place. We're now moving to the east side, to the west side, I'm sorry. And the expectation here is that by the end of the year, we will have the roadway actually completed. So we will actually be able to return it to service. This is a building, again, at the corner of 93rd Street. This is an ancillary building. We are basically now up to the 4th level on the outside and inside. We actually, that's a cavern that we built under the roadway, and that can be seen here. This is the 97th Street corner where we have another ancillary building. We came up about 2 flights, so we have 3 more to go. That's moving along rather well. At the Community Information Center, we had our a new exhibit that is actually very popular in the neighborhood. We had our 10,000 visitor this actually last month, I believe. Right, last month. Basically, that would be the 2nd Avenue at this point. As far as the number 7 line, the station finishes as well as the testing and integration efforts are continuing. The results are encouraging. We're getting incredible cooperation from New York City Transit to do primarily the integration and testing. And at this point, I will refrain from discussing an opening date, but this close. I would.
I didn't hear that. Michael, let me just ask you one question. With respect to the repair of the waterproofing at 86th and 96th on the 2nd Avenue line, how is that progressing?
We had no issue with the waterproofing at 86, though we had an issue at 96th Street, and they're working on it, and we'll be in a much better position to discuss that once they excavate the west side, put back the waterproofing, because there is no waterproofing there right now, and that was the issue, that water penetrated at that point. Once this is done, we expect that to be adequately addressed.
Then, any final questions with respect to the entirety of the agenda? If there are none, is there a motion to adjourn? Second, all in favor? The meeting is adjourned. Thank you.